Sorry about that, everyone. There's no sound because I muted myself. That's inspiring. That's helpful, right? So I'm sorry about that. Anybody who's here from Twitch, I guess, being the first day on Twitch, the first, how many minutes? The first 5 minutes and 9 seconds on Twitch with no sound is helpful. I'm sure that was an effective way to introduce myself to the community and to inspire confidence in my harebrained political analysis. What are you going to do? Apologies, my friends. The best we could do is start over again, as if it never happened. If the White House can do it, if the idiot in the White House can pretend reality doesn't exist, I don't see why I can't.
It's fantastic. You heard the sound was always working. It was working great. You heard everything I said, but I'm going to say it again. It was real sound, but it wasn't sound before.
Anyway, apologies for that. Thank you for letting me know, Catherine, that the sound was out. And, I'm glad I've been able to rectify that. So obviously you didn't hear, hey, Gail, how are you? Good morning. Let me just check Twitch. If you're just joining us, this is my first day on Twitch as well. I don't expect we're going to get much of a following today. I haven't even built out my Twitch profile yet, but I'm just testing the stream on there just to kind of get over there and kind of figure out how it works. And we are streaming to YouTube, but it's not working. So that's something I have to kind of figure out what's going on. Getting right to it, aside from that, the Iranians have said this morning that they're done. Catherine, I'm just on Substack and Twitch. Twitch, I don't know if you use Twitch, and nobody's watching us on Twitch. It's just the first time I'm even trying it. It's just Mitch Ivan on Twitch, I think. I don't think it's Xenocracy. I think, and we're going to talk about that later. I'm going to kind of rebrand everything to be consistent very soon. I'm also streaming to YouTube, but it's not working. So I'm not streaming to YouTube, but my streaming software is telling me that I'm streaming to YouTube, but it's not really a thing. So, but normally if I ever get my shit straightened out, and as you know, Catherine, straightening out my shit is seemingly a lifelong process, and I ever figure out what it is that's working and continue to build upon that, we will probably for the foreseeable future be live streaming to here, YouTube, and Twitch, I think, but I don't know. I'll keep you posted, and I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I tried you on Tube and no Twitch, but you said not working on. Yeah, we're not streaming on YouTube, and also I'm starting a new I think I'm starting a new cohort. They haven't kind of gotten back to us in the last week, so hopefully the cohort isn't canceled. But a live streaming cohort for political pro-democracy influencers and gamers and such, and so I may be streaming elsewhere too once I learn what they have to teach me. Irrespective, let me get to the news. So the Iranians said today that they are done negotiating. They are walking away from the negotiating table. There is no negotiating table, though. There is no one-on-one negotiations. Basically, it's the Iranians sending messages to the Pakistanis sending messages to the United States sending it back to the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis sending it back to the Iranians. And then in the middle of this, or the consistent problem in the whole loop of these negotiations through messages is the idiot in the White House. It's not the people in Iran. It's not the Pakistanis. It's the lunatic in the White House. We are in a war. We've said this a million times, and if one disagrees with me, they're welcome to. But we are in a war where we're in a war that we shouldn't be in. We're in a ceasefire from a war that we shouldn't have been in. And the problem with the war is not the Iranians, it's the imbecile in the White House. It's been that since the beginning. And now the imbecile in the White House he's become so delusional that I feel like I talk a lot about the village idiot Donald Trump's political survival instinct. But I think with his ongoing cognitive decline, whether that's prefrontal dementia or like his father, it's, Alzheimer's, like the beginning of Alzheimer's, or something else, whatever is, not talking about his mental illness here. I'm talking about his cognitive decline. And we've seen over the weeks and months, we've watched his cognitive decline make him more impulsive, more reactive, if you can believe that, right? It's hard to imagine Donald Trump more of anything, right? But he's actually getting worse. We see him declining in real time. We see him falling asleep throughout the day, all day long, whenever he almost every time he's, sitting down during the day somewhere, we see him nodding off. But more importantly, we see a increased impulsivity and a decrease in whatever little bit of common sense was left in that muddled mind of his. And we're watching that, we're watching his statements, his True Social posts, we're watching all of it devolve in real time. And I feel like I used to talk about the fact that he had a political survival instinct. Even when he was, during the first administration, when he wasn't as crazy, pretty fucking crazy, but not as crazy as he is right now during the first Trump administration, he was still an idiot, right? I mean, he was still a malignant narcissist, and he had some decline in his mental acuity, not to the point where we see it now, but there was still, it didn't seem like the prefrontal dementia or whatever it is had really fully established itself in terms of his ability to survive politically, right? And he was able to take advantage of MAGA cult members and sustain the cult. He was able to use everything whenever he was engaged in a particular type of corruption during the first administration, and even for a while during the 4 years when he wasn't president, when he was being indicted and he was on trial. He was able to, his survival instinct and his corrupt nature afforded him the opportunity to continue to manipulate the Republican Party and his base, right? To keep them in line, to keep them hyper-focused on being victims and him being a victim as opposed to the actual crimes he committed. And I attribute that a lot to his survival instinct, his political survival instinct, his corrupted survival instinct. And it was still working. And at the very beginning of this administration, we saw a different Trump, right? We saw he was crazier. We saw he had declined more, and we saw that when he was surrounded by sycophantic weirdos and creeps, right? We saw that when he was surrounded by a cabinet of ass-kissing lunatics that were working really hard to be as crazy and stupid as he was, we were able to see when there was nobody protecting him from himself, the full dysfunction of Donald Trump on display, right? And we were able to see that impulsivity express itself consistently, right? And we were also able to see the decline of his survival instinct, his political survival instinct, right? He would do things over and over again that were just politically disastrous. The way he managed and handled the tariff rollout, and the way he would kind of go back and forth and pick fights, personal fights with Justin Trudeau at the time, who was the prime minister back then, at the beginning of his term of Canada, and Claudia Sheinbaum, but then how he would sort of become friends with them. Moments later, there was all this sort of dysfunctional behavior, how he would threaten them and threaten these, go after wanting to make Canada the 51st state, and make all these politically destructive threats for him. And then as the Epstein file debacle kind of became a thing, starting in July of 2025, with Pam Bondi saying that she wasn't going to release anything else, and there was pushback. As that pushback happened from the right, from the MAGAs, he started making politically ineffective mistakes. And I talked about back then how I had a sense that with cognitive decline, he was starting to lose his grip on reality even more so, and that dementia was starting to supersede a little bit that political survival instinct. Like he wasn't able to make the calls politically that would get him out of trouble with his base as effectively as he was able to do that before. And and then you just saw all of these decisions with Epstein's, with the tariffs, as it went through the months, and then the harebrained war in Iran, because clearly Benjamin Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham manipulated him into doing it, right? And it was a political, it was an absolute, political disaster for him and for Republicans in general. But again, I attribute more and more of it, and then the decisions that he made prior to that with the Venezuelan stuff, and and the murder of things that even MAGA just doesn't like. They don't like brown people. They don't like them, right? But for whatever reason, if Trump still understood his base, he would have understood that even though they don't like brown people, and they certainly despise brown people in the U.S., for whatever reason, and as racist as they may be, they don't like brown people being murdered on the high seas, like picked off of a boat, when they're going like this, right? They don't like that because that's part of American imperialism. And the base was never as dumb as he thought it was. But I think he previously, before the dementia kicked into the point that it was, I think, not that he's intelligent, but his political survival instinct, he had a sense of things, right? He had a sense of things. And I don't think the Trump who had a functioning political survival instinct, an effective one, would not have allowed those Venezuelans to be shot when they were surrendering, or he would have thrown Hegseth, or had one of the generals, had the Admiral Bradley. I think it was Admiral Bradley. If I think I have that right, I'm not sure, but would have had somebody else take the fall for him, right? But that political survival instinct seems to be declining more and more and more. And now we enter this war, and we get to this moment where you have the Iranians, who are like everybody else, like every other geopolitical adversary, right? Everybody else, every other country that he's against, which is everybody except the Russians, right? And sometimes the Chinese and North Korea, but everybody else he's against, right? And some authoritarian leaders in Central and South America, but everybody else he's against, right? He hates them all, right? They would all manipulate him effectively and efficiently, but they would kind of lay off at a certain point because they had their country's best interest, and the goal of them was to manipulate him to get whatever it is that they wanted in the moment. The Chinese mastered this. The Canadians mastered this when it came to tariffs or when it came to geopolitical policy. Putin mastered this years ago, right? Just to manipulate him just enough to get him to do what they need him to do, no matter what that is. And they've all been successful at that. But the Iranians, clearly the Iranians understood this at a deeper level because they were, in essence, at war with us. And they understood that not only can they manipulate this idiot and get him to do what they want him to do, but and not only in some ways was this war that he offered them a gift to them, which affords them the potential to be a much more strategic and powerful force of bad, as far as I'm concerned, in the Middle East. Not only did he give them the power, the ability to let them come out of this war stronger than they were before they went into it, which they clearly are, but I think they understood, and this is total speculation, I think they decided to take advantage of the impulsiveness, of the stupidity, of the lack of what I'm referring, they may not see it this way, but of what I'm referring to as the continued progress of his severe cognitive decline, and which it feels like it's reaching a point now where it's starting to dwarf whatever's left of his political survival instinct. And it feels to me like the Iranians are there. They've done it. They have been able to push him so hard, and he can't do anything about it. He can't do the little bit of political survival instinct that's left, is stopping him from calling for a nuclear strike on Iran, and is stopping him from engaging in a ground war, right? That's all he's got. That's all he's got. That's the only way he comes out of this war with Iran as a fantastic winner. We destroyed that. I mean, in real exact life, no matter, that's the only way. God forbid either of those two scenarios become a thing. God forbid. Although that's not, I don't think we're out of the danger zone of the potentiality of either of those things happening. But I think the Iranians have effectively and intentionally pushed him so hard and pressured him so hard and humiliated him so bad that I think they actually are affecting his cognitive state. I think the stress, the anger, the fear, the fact that he can't, that he has associated with the situation he's gotten himself in Iran, and the fact that there is nobody to protect him. None of the morons surrounding him in the cabinet would even be capable or interested. They've never been interested in protecting him from himself, like his previous cabinet who protected us and him from him. But these current folks haven't done any of that, right? They haven't protected Donald from himself. They've enabled the idiot. They've allowed the idiot and participated with the idiot in making him the worst he can be. And they themselves subsequently as awful as they can be too, right? So they don't have a way out for him. He doesn't have a way out of this. He's completely alone. I mean, everybody fucking hates him. Laura Loomer likes him on Tuesday and hates him on Wednesday, right? You know what I mean? So from the outside, the crazies on the outside hate him. The people who I find myself, repeating their criticisms, which boggles my mind. The Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens and the Megyn Kellys, I mean, they're done with him, right, for now. You know what I mean? So, the only people left are, you get the Proud Boys, showing up in Newark at Delaney Hall because, he still provides them, the get out of jail free card if they engage in, racist, violent behavior, and they, wind up getting charged. If they do something egregious enough, the Department of Justice has to charge them in a federal offense, which I can't imagine they would do anyway. But so they're still on board, right? You know what I mean? But you've got that, and you've got we see on social media, we see the MAGA folks, the few folks left are, who wear the hats, and the states left that still have a lot of MAGA folks, there. But other than their super majorities and, people who are just cult members, when I talk about legislative super majorities, these are people who have to hang on to him because it's the only way that they can, have a job right now. For as long as they have it in their state. If they can gerrymander and cheat at the local, state and federal level to keep a job, they have to they have to remain part of the MAGA cult. But I mean, that's not most of the country anymore. And again, I speak to people all the time who tell me I'm full of shit, and they're welcome to tell me that. I appreciate hearing it. I want to look at the other perspective. I'm not afraid to be wrong, but I mean, election after election, if you can polling after polling, all right, polling can be bullshit. It's just usually bullshit when it shows whatever you think of Governor Mikey Sherrill here in New Jersey or not right now. That's not the point that I'm making. My point is that it showed her in a neck and neck even race with Jack Ciattarelli back in November, and she kicked the shit out of him by 12.5 points. Right? Election poll. If the polls are inaccurate at all, it's that they're inaccurate because sometimes they show close races that are Democratic blowouts. Otherwise, you have you have election after election that proves. Folks can argue with me all they want that MAGA is getting larger. I have had people in red states who live in certain communities where, MAGA is strong, and I get it. It is, and because they're, because they have super majorities in their legislature, and they have a lot of loud voices. They're able to make a lot of fucking noise. But that doesn't mean there's a lot of them left. They're just left in office, right? And they're left, in communities, of course. But those are the cult members. But you're all going to see, I believe, come November, what election after election is proving to us that it's done. The politics of MAGA are done in most places enough to matter. So, and I don't know why I went on that tangent. The other time I went on a tangent, I have no idea what the fuck why I went down the rabbit hole. But let me work my way back to the point, my friends. So the point is, though, that getting back to the war is now we're in a situation where I think the Iranians are doing it again, right? I think they understand that Trump's cognitive decline is their most, like the Strait of Hormuz, Trump's mental state is their second most significant weapon to continue to win the war. Not just win the war, but humiliate the enemy. And they are doing it over and over again. And Trump's stupidity and his cognitive decline, I believe, also further gives Iran the opportunity to delegitimize the Israelis, because they're tied. Trump and the Israelis are tied at the hip right now. Trump and Netanyahu are tied at the hip, and I think I think the Iranian strategy is just incredibly effective at this point, and I think. The CNBC and all other major news outlets are reporting Iran stops negotiations with the U.S., vows to completely block the Strait of Hormuz. The price of oil immediately jumped 7%, right? So what are and it's not like the Iranians did this a week ago. They didn't do it 3 weeks ago. They didn't do it 4 days ago. Donald Trump started manipulating the markets, the oil markets, about 4 or 5 days ago, right? When the Iranians sent a proposal over to the idiot, right? And if the idiot just would have said, yes, it's a fantastic, I don't like all of it, but there's enough of it. We're going to have a 60-day ceasefire. We'll talk about nuclear. But he's so fucking dumb and impulsive right now. If his political survival instinct were still intact in any capacity, he would have done what I told him to do. Right? He would have, not that he's listening to me, but he would have said, after Iran sent their proposal over, the idiot would have said, it's not a great agreement, but I'm working with very good people. We're going to make Iran great again. We're going to build it up. We won. We completely destroyed them. It would take 25 years to build it, but we're going to get the nuclear. He would have agreed to all of their terms, lied about them, called for a 60-day ceasefire, and gone so far as to remove some of our assets in the region, military assets. And the Iranians would have had no choice but to accept that. And the price of oil would have, it was down. It was already down in my area to $3.99 a gallon, right? It was already there. You know what I mean? And I was actually breathing a sigh of relief because I knew the political damage was done to him. I'm fine with that. I felt like maybe this would end and nobody else is going to die. Most importantly, thank God. And then I thought, I don't have to fill up. The way I'm dealing with the gas, the high price of gas, is I'm just putting $20 in my car and in my wife's car like 2.5 times a week. I just can't bring myself to put $60 in, which is $120 each a week. I just can't. I just psychologically I can't do it. So instead, I'm just wasting time going to the gas station more frequently. And we have fucking hybrids, like really good Toyota hybrid RAV4s that get significantly more miles to the gallon, right? But so whatever. But I had a sense that maybe, and then I was preparing myself to start reporting on the inevitable next stupid fucking thing these idiots are going to do, which is probably to attack Cuba, right? Because it's always going to be some dumb shit after the last dumb shit. I keep telling you, it can never get any better because the village idiot Donald Trump can never get any better. He can never improve, especially now, right? He can't improve because he's physically declining. So he cannot get better. It will only get worse. That's all that's possible. I don't know what he's going to look like if he makes it through these 4 years of his presidency. It's going to be crazy beyond. Yeah, I have a failure of imagination to be able to determine how fucking crazy things will look in another 2.5 years. I can't even wrap. I mean, can you wrap your brain around it? It's insane. But irrespective, because I think that political survival instinct is either completely gone or all but gone now, he couldn't do that. He couldn't do what I told him to do, right? He couldn't listen to Mitch. Mitch is I don't really like Mitch. He's not a nice person. He's very mean to me. He says a lot, but he's a loser. He's a fantastic loser. He's got not a lot of people on social media. I got many people. He's such a loser. But he still should have listened to the loser. Right? It would have helped. Donald, next time, listen to me. I don't like you, but I might give you helpful advice when you're fucking up everybody's lives. So listen to me. And that impulsivity, maybe that impulsivity was drunken Pete Hegseth whispering in his ear, "Sir, Mr. President, we need to bomb them. I need to take them out. You're going to be a hero. We need to take America's warriors and destroy them." Maybe it was that. Maybe it was Laura fucking Loomer calling him, "Mr. President, you're doing a terrible job right now. You're not kicking Iran's ass. You need to get in there and kick their asses. All the Muslims deserve their asses kicked." I don't do an impression of Laura Loomer because I never heard her speak. Maybe twice, so I can't channel Laura Loomer. That's the best. I just made that up. So Laura, you're crazy, right? And I don't really have any respect for you, but if that voice was nowhere near, where you are in real life, my apologies. I have to do something to make my content a little bit more interesting because I don't have as big a following as you do, even sort of, and I've got to grow. So if I use voices and they're wrong or bad, apologies for that. But we'll be okay. So irrespective, maybe somebody whispered into his ear, right? And because the political survival, or maybe the crazy, the lunatic inside him, because he likes to kill. Now, I truly believe, and I've said this a million times, now that he's had a taste of blood through the military, by using the military to kill people, and as a malignant narcissist, we all know that one of the symptoms of malignant narcissism is taking pleasure in causing other people pain and suffering, right? They enjoy that. It makes them feel better, feel good about themselves. I don't see why that wouldn't go. I mean, obviously I'm just an armchair cosplaying pretend psychiatrist, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But logically, I don't see how you can't go from a malignant narcissist getting off on hurting people to a serial killer, right? Once he does it once, probably liked it. So maybe it was just in him. I believe he's a serial killer. I think he killed people in Venezuela. He liked it. He liked that it upset the liberals, the liberal lunatics. He liked that his enemies were feeling angry and upset about the fact that he murdered people, right? So he likes that. He wants to feel that. He has to feel that again. I truly believe that. And it could be of the plethora of things I believe that are wrong. I'll accept that. But I really believe he's an actual serial killer right now. Right? And so maybe that was it. Maybe it's not going to be good enough for him to go into Cuba soon. We have assets in Iran, and he had a call, he had an opportunity to call for some strikes a couple of times during this ceasefire. Maybe he thought he could get off by getting a few people killed. Maybe he liked that and get off because his, the liberal lunatics will be mad about it. And, maybe that's what happened. But whatever it is, it wasn't politics, right? It wasn't political survival. that initiated that decision. If he's the one that made it, I mean, maybe Central Command made it themselves. They claim it was a defensive move, so maybe they did it. I don't know, but I feel like if it was his decision, it was another thing that's indicative of the fact that he has no political survival instinct left, or very little of it left. And I think the Iranians, as I've talked about, have now jumped on it. They have manipulated it. And I think, my friends, that the Iranians now, we'll see, it's just a speculative guess, but I think the Iranians now are going to take away the only or another tool that he has access to, which is market manipulation. He can manipulate the markets by saying, like he did a couple days ago, and even though he doesn't understand what he's doing, he's still cognitively aware enough to understand the baseline at a baseline level. If he says that the war is ending and it kind of matches up at all with reality, that the price of oil will drop. When the price of oil drops, and if his friends know when he's going to make that announcement, especially the friends who are trading stocks for him, as Bloomberg reported on last week, we know that he's trading stocks, that they're trading millions, if not billions of dollars of stocks for that fucking idiot, right? In the companies whose future he is directly managing. Defense companies, AI companies. So we know that. So if he makes that announcement and everybody who needs to know about it knows about it, and they do their effective trades when the stock market goes up, and they do and whether that's in the commodities market, in the oils, in the futures market where they're trading oil, or whether that's in the stock market where they're trading companies, right? He's been effectively able to manipulate the markets. And I was thinking that his market manipulation, that's why I thought he had a little bit of political, survival instinct left, because there's a political upside to the market manipulation as well. If the market, if Axios, Barack Ravi, or whatever the fuck his name is, his chief propagandist over at Axios, reports a nonsensical story that the war is over, just about over. Administration officials have told me that, and then it looks credible. The stock market reacts to it. The commodities market reacts to it. And then public opinion, maybe at least within the base, react to it, right? And so he gets a little bit of a political, burst maybe within the cult community, right? Maybe, and I think he lives for that. But I think now the Iranians, with this move today, waiting until today, they could have done this the first time, or probably was like the third or fourth, but the most recent time before today or yesterday that the U.S. broke the ceasefire, when the Navy, I think if they tried to escort a ship through the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians hit it, and then they had hit a few. Actually, there was one even before that. There was one, I can't remember it offhand. There was one before that also, on the Strait of Hormuz, but I can't remember exactly what the story was. But if the Iranians could have done this then and stopped the manipulation of the stock, and taken over the manipulation of the stock market at that point, just stop negotiating, right? But they waited, and I really think that was intentional. I think they wanted to let it set in. They wanted the idiot to feel like he had a win. They wanted the idiot to feel like he was manipulating the markets. He was going to get richer. His friends were going to get richer. He was shoring up his base, and they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. And then today, the U.S. provided them a pretext by attacking. We'll have to read the article, but the article tells where we hit either last night or this morning. Then the Iranians hit back in Kuwait. And apparently there may be some casualties at an American base in Kuwait. We're not getting a straight answer from CENTCOM as usual. They're just fucking lying about it. So who knows how devastating or not the Iranian response was. But then the Iranians come back and they stop negotiations. Oil blows up 7%, 7% in an instant. Donald Trump had just enough time to kind of take it all in, to kind of feel like he had breathing room. Maybe the Iranians were going to leave him alone for a little bit, right? Maybe they're going to let him just do what everybody else lets him do and let him do what he wants as long as they get what they want. But no, they are fucking with him. And I honestly think they are breaking him psychologically for whatever that is worth. Let me just check out the comments and then we'll read some of the reporting. That's enough of my incessant babbling. Let's just head over to Twitch. I still don't see anybody on Twitch, which is perfectly understandable because, again, it's our first day on Twitch. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Twitch grows or not. We'll give it a shot. So, Gail, I have a hybrid, rarely uses gas. Yeah, mine is pretty, it uses gas, but it doesn't use as much. Jordan, Israel's, I guess I'm sure you're up. Jordan, what's with our military joint with Iran? Or are you talking about your joint? Are you, Jordan? Israel. So you're talking about like what is with our joint military sort of relationship in terms of the Iran war with Israel? I think that's probably what you were saying. And who the fuck knows? Right? You know what I mean? Like nothing and everything, right? I mean, I think Trump and Netanyahu would still argue that we are, partners in the war against Iran. Israel has been told, according to Trump, he ordered Israel. There was some headlines. I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, Jordan. You saw some headlines. There was some headlines that I remember a couple days ago, which I found almost laughable, especially to the extreme pro-Israel crowd, of which I'm going to tell you something about in a moment. But there was some reporting that Trump said that he said that he ordered Netanyahu, that Netanyahu will do whatever he wants, and he ordered Netanyahu to stay out of Iran for right now. And I didn't follow I really should have followed the story because, again, our media is legacy media is doing an absolutely abysmal job of reporting on all of this because for whatever reason, even with all the resources they have, they seem to not be able to handle the load, right? Or maybe they choose not to. But, I really would have had to search for follow-up on that. Maybe I would have had to search Israeli media, and I didn't. But I was really curious after Trump, in essence, threatened Netanyahu or lied and said, Israel will do whatever I want them to do. I'm in charge, right? I don't know how Netanyahu reacted to that. I don't know. It just went away. The media covered the comment. It should have been a huge story because I imagine it didn't go over all that well in Israel. I would think. So is that the headlines you saw, or were they different? I mean, that's the most recent headline that I've seen in relation to that issue. But otherwise, there's nothing. There's nothing about it. There's no. It's just. I feel like it's just. I'm going to read your comment on it in a second, Gamer. But it's just a show. It's farcical. Like the whole thing is, right. Like the ceasefire, right. We're in a ceasefire, but we're firing, right. The war in Gaza is over, but every day you see media reports of Palestinians getting killed every fucking day, or at least multiple times a week. But the war's over. There's a ceasefire between the Israelis and Hezbollah, but there's a full fucking war going on, right? So it's all it's all lies. It's all, nothing means anything. Words don't mean anything. It's just the law of Donald and the law of Benjamin, and look, in some of these, I'm sure in Iran, it's like that too, right? I'm sure, misinformation and disinformation from the Iranian regime is kind of what everybody's used to, right? It's just, that's why I keep saying there's no good guys here. We're as bad as the Iranians now. The Israelis are as bad as Hezbollah right now. And I say that with absolute um, conviction. I've had ongoing arguments on Facebook with a couple, and I've kind of stopped because it's pointless. Just to go on a little bit of a side note, I've had. Well, let me read, Gamer, your comment first. Relationship he's been talking about is in regards to the defense bill, stating America will have closer ties, but none of it has been approved. It's just more rhetoric to piss people off. Yeah, and we're also seeing that, right, Gamer, with within the Democratic Party. There's this war of who's taking APAC money and who isn't. There's a significant upsurge within the Democratic community of an intolerance for Israel, even among American Jews, many of us, I should say, and establishment Democrats are struggling with that, and that's also been, at least in terms of, you don't find a lot of reporting for it on cable news, but on social, from mainstream news outlets, you can find a lot of articles, even in mainstream media spaces. And I think there's a lot of conversation going on it if you follow the Democratic Party, the interworkings of the Democratic Party, and the Republicans are going to try to take advantage of that. But they're so bad at everything right now that, like Gamer's saying, everything is, it's just rhetoric they'll use rhetoric to piss people off, but they're so incompetent and randomly transparent that nobody gives a shit anymore. Like, nobody really fucking cares what the Republicans say, except the MAGAs at this point, I think. But just on a little side note, and I'm going to talk about this with conviction. I was having some debates with folks in my community, the American Jewish community, because I did a post about this, a fairly controversial post on it was a vertical post, so it wasn't one that you guys would have seen. You might have seen it. I probably posted it in Substack. You might have seen it in YouTube Shorts, Twitch. I just started, doing things on Twitch, so you wouldn't have seen it like today. So you guys wouldn't have seen it there. But and of course Instagram, Facebook. But Facebook is where the vast majority of the people I know are. The people who just don't follow me or communicate with me because of what I do social media wise. But also, I chose on Facebook to use my personal page as opposed to a Facebook page to build out my community. Which is what I do for a living now, right? This community, but there's a lot of people there from my past, friends of mine. I'd like to say they're still friends. I don't know if they would feel the same way. And I was very, very involved for years. It was important to me, and it was a wonderful time in my life. I was very involved in the nonprofit Jewish community. I've told you guys about this before. I'm Jewish, and I was never religious. I kind of toyed with it for a little bit in my early 30s to mid 30s, but then I was like, no, I'm really not interested in it. But for whatever reason, when I was living in Las Vegas and I was there, I had a small computer consulting company. Just a little one-man show. I was in Vegas for about 10 years, and I had a startup, and where I was doing networking and internet web design and just different things for little businesses popping up all over Vegas in the 90s. Vegas was a boom town, and I wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful place to live for a while. And but I never broke through with that business. Probably had I stayed with it longer, I would have, but I invested 10 hard years into it. And after 10 years, I couldn't pay myself. And I was tired of that. I was lonely because my parents were also in Vegas. We were all in Vegas at the same time. But they had their life. We were very close, but they had their life. I had my life. And I wasn't, because I was so financially strapped because of trying to be an entrepreneur semi-successfully for all those years. I was embarrassed to date, so I didn't really date, and I didn't really have any friends in Vegas at that time. I had a couple friends. That's not true. I had a lot of friends, actually. I was also very into acting, and that was sort of like my dream was to build this company so I could support myself and I'd be an actor. It's something I always wanted to do as a kid. I always loved that. And even as a young adult, and even as a not so young adult, I'm kind of over it now. But that was something I really, really wanted. And when I was in Vegas, there were a lot of movies that came into Vegas at that time shooting, and I would always get extra work. So I'd work my company in the day, and I'd, work another 12-hour shift as an extra in a movie, and it was super fun. I loved it, and I met within that, and I would do theater, and I met lots of good friends in that community, but I was still lonely because I didn't, because I was so financially strapped. After a shoot would end and everybody would go out for breakfast at 4:30 in the morning, I didn't, because I knew that the money, the $150 I made from that shoot, was going right into my computer business, right? It was going right into there. And my menial salary that I was paying myself was what I needed to use for rent and food. So one of the things I decided to do, because I don't like to just be a victim of my own decisions, because it was only my decision that put me in that position for all those years, is I figured let me reach out to a community that's free. It's not really free, but which was the only community I knew, which was the Jewish community, right? So I went to the synagogues, and I met people, and I wanted to start dating, even though I was broke. And I got involved with the Jewish Community Center, and I started meeting people. And I just figured, fuck it, at least I'm making friends. And I started to date a little bit, which is really hard when you don't have any money. But necessity is the mother of invention. So I would find creative ways to do that. I would find, creative ways to I would just take money for rent and go out on a date. That's basically what it was, and then negotiate with the landlord later. But that was all part of the wonderful experience of being a young entrepreneur. But anyway, I got involved enough in the community that I started doing pro bono computer work for the community, for the Jewish Community Center. I started networking their computers, and again, for me, it was a way to give back, and it was a way to just meet more people, make more friends. And I wound up dating somebody who worked there, and it became somewhat serious. And to make a long story short, that person left the job, and I got to know the management at that place, because I was doing pro bono work, and they offered me the girl's job who I was dating. And I was at a point where I was kind of like, you know what, do I really want to stay? Am I going to keep doing this? Am I going to keep driving with this company, or I could get a salary, albeit a small one? I opted for the salary. Walked away from my company, which might have been the dumbest thing I've ever done, because I'd probably be a millionaire now. And I chose the small salary. But it integrated me. My point is, this long-winded story. It's been a while since I told you a personal long-winded story to make a very simple political point. But every so often we've got to get back to that. So I took that job. I was the children's programmer and the singles. I handled all kids programming, which I was completely unqualified for. But any of you that are involved in nonprofit organizations, that unqualified people who are willing to work cheap, are fine. And I was one of them. And I handled the singles programming too, since I was young and single. And that integrated me into the Jewish community. And that's the point that I'm making by this little side story, is for the next, I would say, 8 to 10 years, I worked in the Jewish community, both in Las Vegas. I came back to New Jersey. I explored my personal faith a little bit. I actually came back to New Jersey to go to college to learn to be a cantor, somebody who sings in the synagogue. Midway, I went to a Jewish studies college right outside of Philadelphia. And I learned that I really didn't want to be a cantor, but I also was able to. The college had an abysmal, ridiculous, almost laughable computer system at the time that they were managing, and I first took a part-time job with them to try to fix it and be a student at the college, and then that eventually evolved into a full-time job and I stopped studying to be a cantor, and I worked there full-time for a couple of years, sort of rebuilding their infrastructure, their IT infrastructure. And I became although I tasted and I kind of played around with religion a little bit, I really didn't It's not me. It's not who I am. It's not what I'm into. I didn't want to become super religious. But I also, over those years, became familiar, much more so even than when I was a young kid growing up and I've told you guys this story a lot about how I went to Hebrew school almost 5 days a week, even though we weren't religious. It's just what you did in Philadelphia if you were a Jew, or at least what we did and what everybody I knew did. But within those communities, I became as an adult, being re-exposed to the Jewish community and Jewish communal work. I came to understand the relationship that American Jews have with Israel. Because to be honest with you, I couldn't have given a shit before that, right? My parents didn't raise us to be Israelis. They raised us to be Americans. They didn't care. They understood basically what Israel was all about in terms of as the Jewish people see it. They understood the biblical idea of Israel, but they didn't care. They were Americans. My dad was a blue-collar, hardworking, when he worked, he's 91 now, but when he was working, he worked his ass off for the country, for the Department of Defense. He worked, almost 25 years in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard and another 20 some odd years in the U.S. Arsenal in Philadelphia. And there was some manufacturing site, government, Department of Defense site that he worked in between the Arsenal, I think, and the Navy Yard, I think. But that's what he knew. It wasn't Israel. It was, he's a hardworking blue-collar guy trying to make it. And he likes this president, and he hates that president, and he eats, meatloaf and fucking mashed potatoes. Like, that's my dad, And although he's a little bit more cultured now when it comes to food. But that's him. And that's how I grew up. But I came to understand as an adult this relationship between Israel and American Jews. And I bought into some of it and not all of it, but I appreciated and respected it. And, we reached a point, though, the reason I'm telling you that whole story is because now a lot of these folks knew me in that way. And although I really didn't give a shit that much about Israel, beyond I want to go there, I want to see it, I want to connect with my Judaism, it's and it's a wonderful place in terms of Jews after the Holocaust. It should be a home for all. Like, I got all that stuff, but otherwise I didn't care. It wasn't my home, really. And the folks, I guess, in that community who I am now I'm going to get back to the point that I was making in the beginning of this long-winded story. The folks within that community who now follow me on Facebook clearly misunderstood, many of them, where my allegiance lies. And many of them did until this post came out, where my allegiance was never to Israel. I'm an American. That's my citizenship. That's my country of birth. That's the country that I love, and that's the country I refuse to let this asshole fuck up and turn into an autocracy, right? It is not Israel. And secondly, because as an American Jew, I don't have a profound allegiance to the state of Israel, although I was conditioned since birth to believe that Israel is the good guys. I've been able to break out of that mindset by seeing things and hearing things. Just like many of us born and raised in America, as children, as teenagers, many of us were always taught America was the good guys. For me, I didn't live through the Vietnam War, right? I was born in 1968. I might have been around, but I didn't know anything. I was under the impression until the first Iran war, or the second Iran war, really, that we were usually the good guys. We had some shits. We had some bad things that we did. But overall, we're the good guys, right? Yeah, no. Right? When Dick Cheney and George Bush lied to us about weapons of mass destruction, and we all knew that they were fucking lying, and then later, not that much later, we find out that we're torturing people And it's okay because they're brown and they're terrorists and we're fucking torturing them in a gulag in Cuba. I'm like, we're not the good guys all the time. And then because my eyes saw it and my ears heard it, I was able to discern that, you know what? My national identity is significant, but it doesn't trump my moral identity. It doesn't trump my sense of humanity. And it's okay to acknowledge that I was wrong when I was a child, and I was mistaken when I was a teenager, and I was even duped as a young adult. And now it's okay. I can love my country and call out its worst atrocities. And then as I grew and I evolved, over time, and I got to know people outside of my bubble, like black people who never saw this country as a safe place, ever, right? And their life experience was completely different from the earliest age because my parents never had to have the conversation with me about getting killed by the police, right? So when that whole situation kind of happened and evolved, I was able again, because I'm willing to be wrong, because I'm willing to look beyond my bias, I was able to say, holy shit, there's a whole fucking world out here that I don't know about. And yeah, maybe it took Derek Chauvin, me seeing the video of him choking the life out of a man handcuffed, laying on the ground. And it took that and then subsequent protests where the black community and white people protesting out of a sense of desperation because we all watched George Floyd murdered. Maybe when Rodney King got the shit beat out of him, I didn't really get it, right? But I fucking get it now. And it's okay to say I was wrong and I screwed up and I didn't know any better. And I do now. And my whole life has been that since then. So when I had these debates, if you can call them that, on Facebook recently with folks who once knew me from the Jewish community, but they're still so pathetically, American Jews that are still so pathetically wrapped up in their own fucking bubble. Some of these folks are not young, and terms were thrown at me like, and I'm used to when the MAGAs call me a libtard, when they call me gay, like that's an insult, right? When they call me, when they threaten me, when they, call me the most egregious names. I usually I find, they're so ridiculous sometimes that it's comical. And when you get the actually intelligent MAGA, who still is a vile, putrid racist, but they are smart and they come out with these very creative insults, I actually enjoy that. I do. I mean, maybe it's masochistic, right? And slightly sadistic, but I like debating them and arguing with them because, they're worst insults for me. They don't bother me. They don't affect me. But when I was getting these words that were not libtard or, or dumb Jew or it's stuff I've gotten all my life, but from people who I once knew, who were using terms like so disappointed in you, or somebody turned one of my famous. Nobody called me the village idiot, although that would have been funny. I would have appreciated that. But useful idiot. That I'm a useful idiot. That I'm I'm a victim of Arab money, right? Again, coming from people who I know and who I once respected, that stings. More so than racist creeps and ignoramuses that are, that are just, that are just doing what they're doing. And I realized in the process of that, as I was sort of trying to debate them, and again, some of these folks are academics, so and I was a student when they were professors, and so there's a I used to really be respectful of that position, and I used to be intimidated by that. But now I'm 57 years old, and like fuck you, I can write better than you. You want to do this? Let's go. I can use more big words, and your intellectual academic prowess is no match for the truth. You know, and the fact that you live as a seasoned academic in a narrow-minded bubble that Israel can do no wrong, and that you are so personally offended by the fact that I call out a genocide that I see in real time, and the fact that you should be ashamed of yourselves because you were teaching about the Holocaust, and now you enable one. Um, it stung me to. I know that it's real, and I see it a lot. Um, I just hadn't seen it with the people that I know. And it's always a little bit worse when people you respect and when you know they're they're no better, in all honesty, than the MAGA extremists. Because when you when you stand for a genocide, whether you call it a genocide or whether you call it a mass murder or whether you call it ethnic cleansing, I mean, all of those things happened in Gaza. And when you make propagandist arguments about, uh, I had one person who told me that all the stories and the only reason that we thought that, and I'm telling you guys, this is a a former college professor, somebody with at least one, probably multiple doctorates. That the only reason we bought into that, I was dumb enough to buy into the war, the starvation narrative, was because there was a release of an obvious AI image of starving kids where somebody had three legs, right? And when I see that level of ignorance in in people I know, it's a little bit more jarring. I remember, although we haven't had her on in a while. I know those of you who've been with me for a while. When Crowdsource Carrie comes on, and again, I'm gonna get Carrie on again. It's just I just haven't been doing any interviews, as you guys see, and I've talked about why. But we're gonna get back to that. And Carrie would talk about her dad, her family, and it being, there being, MAGA influence in it still in her people closest to her. And, I would hear about it and I would really feel for her, and for people who their families have been broken apart. She's really trying hard to keep hers together. And I admire her for doing that. Um, and I admire somebody for walking away too. They're both, everybody's got their own personal situation. I kind of I felt bad, right? You feel bad for them. Um, I don't have that, right? I talk about my mom and my dad all the time, and they hate Trump with the venom of a thousand cobras, right? But I felt it, right? But when I see now, having seen, received some of the pushback, the venom, the backlash. And by the way, the reason this is new is because I've only gone onto Facebook in the last 4 months, maybe the last 3 months. It was just because of the influence from some of the folks over at Chorus, telling us how effective Facebook can be right now. And, and to go, and it's worth it to go there and go hard because you can build it up and it monetizes very well. And I've gone from about 185 Facebook followers to about 3,800, which is some nice growth, but I need a hell of a lot more. But I'm thankful for what I've gotten. But I'm in the space now all the time. So this community, and you guys know what I do. You know what I say, but there's a certain amount of cowardice in all of that because until recently, I haven't gone to Facebook. I would occasionally feel like I need to go on Facebook and show everybody what my truth is, right? And I would go on, I would do a post, and I would close Facebook for 2 months, so I would never see the backlash, right? And then I would kind of go. So I've been a bit of a coward, and I'm again, I'm not ashamed to admit it. Well, I am ashamed to admit it, but I'm willing to admit it. I've been a coward, and it took it really took, for all the wrong reasons, in essence, reach and money to get me to go there full time. And I realized there's a price to be paid, if I want to try to tap into that reach and get some of that money. The very least I can do is have the courage to face the people who really know me and expose my truth, and deal with that. I have family members, who are mad. I have a whole, I have family members who are very connected to Israel, and there's a lot of, there's been quite a bit of pushback from that space. But again, my point is that now that I've mentioning Kerry, and then I'm going to mention Joe Walsh, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. But having people I know who maybe aren't even in my life anymore, but feeling the sting, a little bit by just having the raw courage to just go on a social media outlet because I want to get paid, and getting the pushback from them, and feeling how shitty that feels. And also how frustrating it feels to know that smart people, good people, smart, good people are being propagandized, duped, and they're projecting because they're accusing me of the very thing that's keeping them blinded, right? It was kind of a shitty feeling. Then I go and I think about what Carrie did and people like her, maybe a lot of you guys as well, that's, her family, right? Good, people as close as you can be. So if I'm feeling this from people I barely know anymore, now I have a different sense of empathy, maybe a different sense, maybe I'm a little more sympathetic, because the feeling is even more significant when I know the people. And now I can only imagine what kind of courage it takes to stand up when you really know the people. And then again, I take it a step further, and I talk about my enormous respect for Joe Walsh. If you don't follow him, you're not going to. I don't know if he's on YouTube for you guys. Sorry, we're not really streaming to YouTube today because that's not working. I don't think he's on Twitch, so you guys aren't going to follow him there. But former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh is on Substack, and if you're not following him, I recommend it. I mean, his I don't agree with every one of his positions, and his content doesn't always catch my attention. But what he did, he was a MAGA extremist in the beginning, back in 2017, 18. He was one of the original members of the Freedom Caucus. He was as racist and narrow-minded as they come. He was a thorn in Obama's side when Obama was president. Like, I couldn't stand to hear him. I couldn't stand, like, when Joe Walsh would come on, it would be like, like, he was such a dick. Not like Randy Fine. Like, if you ever watch Republican intentional, almost performative asshole Congressman Randy Fine, he's such a low class person, in terms of his, being a racist and Islamophobic and a pretend, it's so fake because he's just such, it's he's really a scumbag, but anyway, Joe Walsh was never that low or that much of a crud, but he was awful. But Joe and obviously his entire his job, his as a congressman, family members, friends, that was his whole fucking community. But when Donald Trump was elected, and 2 years into Donald Trump, and he saw what Trump was about, and as much of a racist as he was, and as delusional as he could be, he still could not allow himself to deny what he saw with his eyes and he heard with his ears. He couldn't allow himself to disassociate himself from his core principle that the Constitution is what keeps this country what it is, right? He couldn't, that the rule of law is what keeps this country functioning. And even though he, as a congressman, found ways to effectively, parse the Constitution to and policy and legislation to support his ignorance and his racism. When it came down to his red line was no, not going to have a fucking authoritarian no matter what. No matter what. No. And he said fuck you to Trump. No, and he was the first victim, right? In terms of Trump going after members of Congress and taking over the entire Republican Party and turning it into a cowardly, pile of pathetic MAGA shit, right? He was the first one to say no, and he lost everything. He lost family members, he lost friends, he look, he lost his job. And look, the pro democracy, we weren't pro democracy back then. We didn't think we needed to be. But the Democratic community wasn't quick to embrace him. Are you a fucking asshole? Seriously? Go fuck yourself. He was in the Marjorie Taylor Greene space, right? Although, she's kind of slowly finding her way in, but then she kind of, does something that, which is absolutely horrible. That makes her kind of fall out again. But it took Joe years, and it took the decency of Democrats in Congress, to some of them, to and people around him, to communicate with him who normally wouldn't. And he started to change. But even before he changed, even after he was out of Congress, he spoke out vehemently, no matter when he was alone and out there against Donald Trump. And then as he started meeting people in the cable news, circuit, because he'd get on MSNBC and he'd meet black people and brown people, and he'd meet women, right? And he'd meet people and he'd talk to them, and his mind started to change. And now, he really he did his best to try to get Kamala elected, not because he doesn't still consider himself as a conservative and a Republican, but because he regrets that Kamala would have been unacceptable to him in the past because she's black and she's a woman, and then because she's a Democrat, right? But by understanding that, first of all, learning as an older man, and what is he, in his 60s or whatever, but learning that being black and being a woman is not anything that because he's not black and a woman, it doesn't mean he's better than these people. And that learning that these can be friends. These can be people that he needs to stop hating, and learning that by getting to know them. And then understanding that it doesn't matter that some of his political positions were extraordinarily different than Kamala's could ever be, that democracy mattered more. There was a red line, and of course he's going to vote for Kamala and bust his ass to get her elected because he has to, and now he's become a Democrat, and was his choice. I mean, he's evolved to that point. And I guess I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I don't know how I got from there to here, but it's been a while since this happened. Since I've kind of gone off on a tangent about something unrelated to what we're talking about, but I expect I'll be doing more of this because I'm kind of lightening up a little bit, in social again. I'm kind of a new thing where I'm kind of not lightening up my content, but lightening up my intensity to grow and build. I'm kind of like just being me again. So, I mean, I guess taking it back to my point, and then I'll work it back. I'll somehow tie this back to the Iranians, not negotiating anymore. We'll figure out how to make that connection. But, um, you know, when I see these friends that are stuck in this loop, um, and I see the courage of people who have stepped out of their loops. And I mean, in all honesty, right now, although anti-Semitism is at a record high, and it is all around the world, there's no question. It's a real thing. You know, let's be real. My friends in the suburbs of Philadelphia are not facing real and present danger, and, any more than I am, so like, yeah, absolutely. Let's stand against anti-Semitism, no matter where we stand, no matter where we are. There are Jews in places now that are really at risk of being slaughtered. And that's always been a thing with the Jewish community. And at any given moment, any, sociopath with a gun anywhere could, God forbid, walk into a synagogue again and blow it up. And there is influence peddling right now that is inspiring that. So that's a real world possibility. And it's even a potentiality at times. But my God, recognize your fucking privilege. If we compare where we are to where my grandmother was, where my grandfather was, when they ran as children from Russia to avoid the pogroms. So they lived in these small shtetls, these small towns in Russia, and either they could have been poor or they could have just been getting by, because they weren't citizens for decades. All these people know the history of the Jews. They taught it to me, right? They teach fucking classes about it. It's what's so astonishing to me, right? Like, they know the history and they know the biblical history, and they know the Jews of the Old Testament were sometimes brutal, and sometimes, and more often, brutalized, but sometimes brutal. And they know, the religious ones know, that God frequently punished the Jews. For fuck's sake, they were, in the biblical story, they weren't allowed to, a whole generation of them weren't allowed to enter the land of Israel. That's the whole Exodus story. That's Moses. That's Passover. That's the precursor to Easter, right? Because Easter was about the Last Supper, right? I mean, come on. Easter's about everything that happened after the Last Supper. But my point is that it wasn't always easy to be a Jew. But you're not really. But now you live in a country as dangerous as it is, where it's okay, and there's it's probably the first time in modern Jewish history that we're safe as we are, right? That we don't have to run from pogroms, here in America, and that we can fight back. For whether we like them or not, you have the ADL, you have these organizations that have been around, we have the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? We have these organizations that have been around for years that we can use, and we can stand up and call out anti-Semitism without worried about getting arrested or killed, right? In a blood libel. I have had Jews accuse me on Facebook of fermenting the blood libel, that I'm so dumb. And I shit you not, I'm so dumb and I'm so fucking clueless that I'm a danger from the inside, right? That I am now propagating the blood libel, because I'm calling out genocidal behavior from the Israelis. It is staggering to me. But you now live next to maybe during the Golden Age in Spain, when the Muslims were in charge of Spain, probably comparable to the Golden Age in Spain, which was when it was really quite nice to be a Jew in Spain during the Golden Age, under Muslim rule, not Christian rule. The Golden Age ended, when the Christians took over and we had the Inquisition. The Muslims, Jews prospered in Spain under the Muslims. They taught me that. The very people who who are telling me that I'm using Muslim propaganda to initiate the blood libel right now. But that's another story anyway. That's where I learned this history, in those classes with these folks. So, now we're in a position where we can stand up, and we have to stand up for against anti-Semitism. We can stand up for our country, for America. We can stand up for the oppressed. We can stand up like we have an absolute obligation as Jews who were once slaves to stand with the black community and demand reparations for them, and to stand up against what's happening with these racist southern states trying to take away, in essence, the right to vote through taking away representation that's happening in real time. Are my friends that are arguing with me, are they standing with those communities? Are they getting on social media like I am? And are they getting on Facebook and making their views known, or are they afraid? Because someone else in the community who maybe funds their next research project is with Howard, is a fan of the idiot's son Kushner, and is afraid that AIPAC and the Jewish right won't like that because they're standing with the black community for their civil rights. And we should be standing above all and calling out. It doesn't mean we're not Jews, and it doesn't mean we're we're anti-Semitic or against being Jewish. If you call out the Israeli government because your eyes show you, and it's not the three-legged fucking fake AI video, that is, or picture or whatever that showed the starvation. The starvation was reported by relief organizations on the ground. And I had someone tell me that the relief organizations on the ground were actually just pawns. They were just the UN, Oxfam. The person actually named the names of all these relief organizations that are basically just Arab terrorists and fawns of the terrorists and terrorists on the ground. They were the same fucking relief organizations that the Jewish community believed when they were telling us that there was genocide in Darfur, that there was genocide in different. Was it DR? Was it the Democratic Republic of Congo? I think it was, but I don't. That may be incorrect. That was telling us years ago about ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Serbia, right? It was the same. It was the same group, but somehow those groups are magically evil now because Benjamin Netanyahu and his propagandists tell us they are. So I just, I feel like it's a moment for those in my community to stand up for everything, including against Israel's behavior, and let Israel course correct in its elections. Anyway, that's enough of that. Well, how do I tie this back to Iran and the negotiations? I got nothing. I think this was just on my mind, and I just found a way to tell you about it. Lacey, so what do we have here? Lacey, would love your opinion on what's happening in Delaney Detention Center. New Jersey governor's handling of it, very controversial. I have missed a live on that. I haven't done one yet. That's yeah, you didn't miss it, Lacey. I've been, my lives, have been, all this kind of broke really over the weekend. I didn't have a chance to do a live over the weekend. I didn't do any posting really over the weekend either. I'm kind of behind on all my content. This fucking sucks. I am so disappointed in Mikey Sherrill. I have two positions on it, to be honest with you. There's the political one and there's the human one. First of all, let's just talk about what infuriates me. It should not. There's no excuse for Mikey Sherrill to have taken 4 days to get out there in the first place, right? She should have been on top of this immediately and been out there, with Andy Kim, with local legislators and members of Congress. I don't know what she was thinking. Secondly, I can't. I hate it when my fucking candidate, you know, fucks up like this, and then their ego gets in the way, and they don't admit the fuck up and fix it. You know, you you cannot like bringing the state police in without a tight leash. I get that Mikey Sherrill, I get what her intention was, right? And I think she's sincere in her intention. I know there's a lot of folks in my community. There's a lot of folks I know who are on the ground there. I know people who are on the ground there, who are incensed. And they think she's just full of shit. She's just another fucking big mouth. She might as well be a Republican. I'm not there. I'm not there with them on that thinking. I think she is sincere in her argument that she did not want to give ICE a pretext, and she did not want to allow ICE to turn Newark, New Jersey, and allow the Proud Boys and the Trump administration to turn Newark into and New Jersey into Minnesota. And I think you could have had a situation that could have started in Newark, and with Mark, we don't know how crazy and stupid Mark Wayne Mullen is yet, and how and if he would have used this as an opportunity to surge ICE into Newark and then open up a can. And then you would have had the village idiot trying to distract everybody from Iran, from his fuck up in Iran. And he would have been, we're going to send them in. We're going to make it safe. We're going to send them to Jersey City. It's a terrible place. We're going to send them to Patterson. What about Camden? We're going to send them into Camden. We're going to clean it all up. We're sending the National Guard in. And Mikey Sherrill saw the writing on the wall. And I believe when she said she didn't want to give them the pretext to do that, right? But all she would have had to do if you're going to send the state police in, you send them in on an extraordinarily tight leash, right? And you set up your parameters around ICE. You don't set them up around the protesters. That, it would have been an extraordinarily different, even if you had folks from the outside who wanted to start shit, right? Because we had that in California too, right? We had, legitimate protesters all over the place. 99.99% of the California protesters were legitimate protesters, right? Then you had a tiny percent of people who just wanted to start shit, right? And then you had you had Proud Boys and stuff who wanted to start up with the people who wanted to start shit. And, you had that, right? And in Minneapolis, you didn't have anybody that wanted to start shit except fucking ICE, right? You had them initiating violence, right? So I think if Sherrill would have set up a perimeter for ICE, and it would have started a big fight with the Trump administration, but dare them to go after the protesters. Dare them. Fuck you. Set up a perimeter that says, this is your space. This is as far as you can go outside of this detention center, right? And if you, and then you step beyond that, we're going to arrest you, right? And there are people and again, she should have hyper-focused on the fact there were people in there starving themselves because of these abhorrent conditions. That should have always been the narrative. But she fucked up, right? And I truly think that this is what happened. She didn't put the state police on a short leash. She allowed them to move, it seemed to me she allowed them to make their decisions about how they want to handle it. And I don't have a lot of confidence in the leadership of any state police force throughout the country right now, because you have MAGA infiltration in all of these spaces. So why would you leave them to their own to do what the fuck they want? You're the boss. You're the governor. You're in charge of the state police, right? You call the shots. So allowing them, it was inevitable if you allow a police force, and why, and maybe work with instead of the state police, work, maybe it wasn't possible. Maybe they didn't have the resources. But my argument would be work with the mayor of Newark and see if you can, with the police in Newark, see if you can figure out a solution. Because you're going to have less chance that the Newark Police Department is corrupted by MAGA at the leadership level than you're going to have at a state police. I mean, I just think it was poorly thought through. And I think it was her naivete. I think she's on the right side of history. I'm not with the folks that are making the argument that she is just a Trumper now. It's not. I don't. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't buy that. But and then when she tried to spin it, it just got worse. We're keeping the people safe. I'm keeping. No, you're not. You're fucking not. You can't argue with what we've seen on social. I saw people I know. Well, I saw people on the ground who I know and trust in real time telling me what the fuck is going, not telling me, but on social media, people I know, people I will see at 12:30, right? I know these people are not bullshitting because I know them. So you can't tell me that you tried to protect everyone when people I know on the fucking ground were telling me what was happening and how at risk they were and showing it to me. So I think the political solution at that point, after that happened, for Governor Sherrill would have been to come out and own it. Own it. Get your state police immediately under control first. Tell them to back the fuck off. Forget about these fucking First Amendment zones. Get them to get them to resign if they're not going to do it. Reestablish your parameters. And there's no such thing as a First Amendment zone. Reestablish your parameters, put the parameters on ice, and then get back on, and then get out there after you've done something and say, look, I'm sorry, I fucked up. I've been governor for 6 months now or 4 months, and I've done some things well, but I fucked this up. My intention was to protect the protesters, and my intention was to make sure that this doesn't snowball into another Minneapolis, another Minnesota, right? That was my intention, but it was wrong. I fucked this up. I apologize. I took my eye off the ball. I allowed the state police to do what they chose to do, but it's not going to be that way anymore. It's not going to, as long as there are police, and if you get violent, just like if you're a violent protester on any side, just like there were in California, we're going to arrest you. We're going to take you off the street. But 99% of you are not violent, and it was my mistake. It was my fuck up. We initiated violence because people were just trying to protect themselves. If she would have just come out and said that and refocus, as opposed to doubling down and giving us this bullshit that I'm just trying to protect everybody, and going politician on us, she would have turned this around completely. Because the people out there there was a small percentage of people that were out there looking to start shit, but it was just like California, just like LA. There were not, most of them were just out there to stand. I mean, fucking Andy Kim, our senator, he's a hero, right? He got, pepper sprayed. You got to take that. I'm not saying you got to take being pepper sprayed, but for Governor Sherrill to come out and say, admit she fucked up, that's like the political version of getting pepper sprayed. Take the L. You're governor. You got 6 years. Admit you fucked up. This is going to go away no matter what, guys. I'm sorry. Politically, it's not that big a deal, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a very big deal in terms of Where the fuck do we go from here? What is the entire focus of the, what is left of, we allowed the right to steal the narrative because nobody is focused on the people who are starving themselves to death. We're focused on how much of an asshole Mikey Sherrill is. And that's the stupidity, too. I'm not just going to say it, of those of us on the left. We allow ourselves to be pulled off message because we don't like getting fucked over, right? And we've got to be more disciplined on that as well. That is not the conversation. We have allowed the conversation, and I just did it here. So I'm responsible for it, too. And I didn't think look, I haven't had a chance to get worked up about this, because I didn't really talk about it, publicly, but, as I'm kind of working through it now, I guess, I mean, I knew how angry I was about it, but I didn't know how, I didn't know how annoyed I was with Mikey Sherrill and how annoyed I am about the messaging getting twisted, because nobody, like I said, the media is not focused on the hunger strike, and the hunger strikes don't matter, and that is insane. And Cheryl has to take this. And the reason I'm arguing that, and I know, I'm sorry I don't mean to get you upset, Gail, on this one, but the reason that I'm telling you politically, it's just not. It's a big deal. I mean, I don't mean the whole thing. It's a huge deal. It's that's not what I mean when I say it's not a big deal. I'm talking about the long-term politics of it. Unless Cheryl completely fucks up the rest of her 6 years, nobody's going to think about this in 3 years, especially if she does a good job with everything or most other things. Especially if she stands up to the Trump administration, right? It's already, unfortunately, starting to go away, unfortunately. So that is what is so that's part of what's so frustrating for me. And her mismanagement and her mishandling of this is that politically it's out of the news mostly. And that's what I mean by saying it's a big deal to me, but it's not a big deal politically for her. And maybe I'm too pessimistic about it, but I know this fucking news cycle. I live in it, and this story's fizzled. At least the story about the hunger strike has fizzled. And that's egregious. And what's it going to take? And unfortunately, what's going to get this hunger strike? What's going to bring this back to the hunger strike? God forbid somebody dies. But we won't even know anyway, because these scumbags are going to cover it up. So I guess, and I'm going to read your comments in a second, guys. I can't see them because I have the camera here in the comments here. So I apologize. I know this is a hot topic, and I want to definitely. I'm sorry, guys. I have some postnasal drip. I definitely want to read where you're at and engage in the conversation. It's just. I am so disappointed in her because I think her intentions were not bad. I don't think she is a warmonger. I don't think she wants to. I think she believes in the First Amendment. I think all of that stuff is real. I think why I'm so disappointed in her is she fucked up and she didn't own it, and then she doubled down on fucking up. And the consequences of that decision, I think the end result is somebody in that fucking gulag, that concentration camp, dies of a hunger strike because and nobody ever knows about it. And that I fear is the tragedy. And maybe she got a little win. I mean, it's a big win because they've ICE capitulated and at least people can go visit again, whatever that means. Last thing I'll say about this, and then I'm going to read your comments. The only thing Cheryl does for immediate short-term political fix is she gets that thing, she shuts it down. And she is, if she applies, from what I've seen from Mikey Sherrill, uh, minus this moment, she makes this a mission to shut this motherfucker down, she's tenacious and aggressive enough that if anyone can do it, she can do it. So that's what I need her to do. I don't give a shit. They won't shut it down. You shut it down. Find some way. Find and I hope she does, and I hope she saves herself politically, because she'll shift from zero to hero if she does that. Anyway, let me start with Gail, because I apologize, Gail. I didn't mean to dial in on your comment only. It's just I looked over and yours was the one I saw, so I didn't mean to kind of put you in the spotlight there. And I hope I didn't belittle what you were saying, because I think what you were saying was real. So Gail, I get what you're saying, though. I get what you're saying. Things bother me more than most other people. Look, and again, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to refute what you're saying, except I don't know you other than how well I know you through our community. So I've never met you in real life. I don't think it's that they bother you more. I think that you are demanding change, and you are intolerant of these abuses of power, and you have no patience anymore for these abuses of humanity, and that's what we need. Right? I mean, and I think, Gail, I just think your red lines have been crossed too many times. And there's a sense of, other than verbalizing it, there's a sense of helplessness, because other than talking about it, right, and getting it out of our systems, what else can you do about it until November? And I know you're not here in Jersey, but like, we voted for Cheryl. We chose her. And it was supposed to not be this. This is what I think has so many of us twisted too. Where I told you I don't agree with the folks who are saying that Cheryl is, she's just a right-wing shill, and she's in it with ICE, and I don't believe that. I'm not in it, but a lot of those same folks, I am like, we voted for you. People busted their ass. I mean, I didn't work for the campaign, but so I can't say I was out there campaigning for her, with her, because I don't campaign. That's not my role. But I was telling you guys, there was a point where I was emailing almost every day for weeks, the campaign, like just trying to, and thankfully they didn't listen to me because they won, right? But when I was worried they were going to lose, just trying to get them to send out different messages, and phone banking from home, and other shit that I just, and this is not this behavior was not what I wanted. So it was, it shouldn't have been it shouldn't have been this way. Gail is very strong and doesn't put up with stuff she sees, and I love it. Amen. I'm right there with you, Lacey. I'm right there with you, Lacey. I mean, it's funny, Gail, like, and again, I don't mean to, like, make you uncomfortable by kind of, well, I do. I mean, I don't want to keep you uncomfortable, but I want to bring this up. Like, so I hope you're not uncomfortable, but drunken Pete Hegseth spends his time cosplaying as a warrior. Talking about like how much of a warrior he is, and the warrior ethos, and the warriors, how he's going to make the warriors protect America, and how he's going to shoot them dead and have no quarter on the enemy, have no mercy, right? Fucking Pete Hegseth, right? And then you have these supposed like, freedom fighters, right? Like these pieces of shit that stormed the Capitol, that call themselves patriots, and the Proud Boys, and these other like assholes, right? That like, They're the warriors. They're the people that do it, right? They're the Americans. And you know what? It's all, but I think Lacey's point is, and all of you guys, but you're the warrior, you're the warrior, you're the patriot, you're the one who stands up and says no. You're the one who isn't performative. You're the one who isn't fauxing, isn't presenting fake outrage. You think the Proud Boys are fucking real? They're not real. It's all bullshit. They don't, they may be racist at heart, but they're not really going to give a fuck about the Constitution. They're just self-victimized, self-loathing boys with no confidence, no ideology, and no dignity. They stand for nothing. And they have nothing to lose because they have nothing. But, when somebody like Gail, you stand up and you speak out and you can't take it anymore. It's real. It's the real thing. And, you're willing to, put it all on the line. So keep doing it. Hey, Angie, how are you? It's good to see you guys. Anyway, I'm sorry. Let me go back a little bit earlier in the conversation, just see if there's anything else here. Gail, so she said I know I'm going back further in the conversation, but I just want to, read, as many comments. Lacey, she kind of praised the police too. It's not good. Agree with you. I think, again, it's just bad politics. You're supposed to praise the police. And, Gavin Newsom did it. And, but, he has enough credentials. Gavin Newsom can get hammered. A lot of people don't like him, but overall, he's fairly respected, by the right and by the left, not the right, by, most folks on the left, and folks in the center. So even when he praised his police for not tolerating violent, people who came there to create violence, it was believable. But it was a hell of a lot harder with Mikey Sherrill's, what Mikey Sherrill did. So I don't know. It's the last thing we needed. And again, as I said, I feel like, I feel like the biggest tragedy of this isn't the protesters who got their asses kicked, and the assault on the First Amendment. It's all tragic. It's that the people in there who were starving themselves are going to die because they're not going to get medical care and we're not going to know about it. Or if they survive, they're going to get punished and we're not going to know about it. And, and I don't know. I don't know what else to say because I don't know. I don't know what there is to, I don't know. It's horrible. Angie, better. My husband is healing one day at a time. Yeah, thank God. I'm glad to hear that. So he's, he had the valve repair, right, Angie? So yeah, hang in there. Send him our love. That's just, that when my mom had her valve, my dad's had a valve repair fairly recently, but it was an easy one. It was it was not very minimally invasive. They went through his leg and he just had a little bit of recovery. My mom's was just fucking brutal several years ago. And it just takes, especially if you're on that heart lung machine, right, for a long time, it takes, it takes a long time. I mean, the physical stuff heals, but the heart has to be reconditioned. And thank God it happened, and you guys have him, and he's going to be okay. And just that's that is good news. And just be patient. It takes a while. And, it takes a while for the heart to kind of do its thing. I don't know why, but that's what I experienced. Anyway, guys, it's about 12:15 right now. I apologize for ending the live today on such a heavy. Let's say take a quick look over at, because I haven't really looked at Twitch. I just need to kind of start getting used to Twitch. If you just joined us, and if you're on Twitch, I mean, I think we have one person watching right now. If you're on Twitch, it's just the first time I've ever been on here. I do political analysis fairly consistently. Been doing it for several years. We'll be going live. I'm eventually going to be coming live on Twitch regularly. We'll be multi-streaming. I stream to Substack, Twitch, YouTube. The YouTube has failed today. I haven't built out this Twitch profile. Nobody knows who I am yet. So I'm going to start building it out, putting some artwork up, and doing more of this. If you're with us on Substack, please, or you, well, even though YouTube isn't working, I still want to say, or YouTube, please like and follow. I guess I don't know what you do on Twitch, but if you liked this, please do that too. If you want more analysis like this beyond just the lives, please head over to Substack or to YouTube. I'm at xenocracy.news, Zenocracy.news on Substack. YouTube, it's Xenocracy, Zenocracy. My name is Mitch. And please subscribe. If you want to support my work, please head over to Substack and consider a paid subscription, or if you have one and it's something that's doable and comfortable for you, please consider upgrading to paid. Oh, Angie, no, I'm sorry, Angie, I missed that. The yes, and also septal myactin. I can't read the word. I know it's a word. I just can't. I can't read it. Septal Mike. I can't fuck it. I don't know. I can't say mycotomy and more. You are so right. Puts life into perspective. Thank you for sharing this. So thank you. Thank you for sharing something so personal with us, with this community. Because it takes courage to, talk about that kind of stuff publicly. So, we need it. We need to hear people doing good. We need to hear people, coming out on the other side. So keep us posted at how your husband's doing, and give him our love and our good energy and all that, because I think we all need the good stuff. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap the live for now. I probably won't do another live today. It'll probably be a video post because I need some YouTube long form. We'll put this up on YouTube and Substack. Twitch folks, the lives they're usually around this time every day, but I'm kind of trying to work out my content production schedule when I do lives, when I do long form video content. And of course, I'm at Mitch Ivan on all my socials, all my vertical socials. So follow me there. I love you guys. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, one live at a time, or one recorded episode at a time. You just got to chunk through it. That's how we get through. We have over 2 years behind us now. Well, not really. We have almost 2 years behind us now of this stupid administration. Who would have thought we'd make it this far with all the crazy, fucking insane shit that's happened? But we just keep doing this. We just show up and we do this every day. And eventually it'll be November and the midterms will happen. And then it'll be January and Democrats will be in charge of the House and the Senate, and there'll be some guardrails. And then it'll be 2028. And we'll be talking about how we're going to rebuild this country back to whatever it's going to be post-Trump. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Be well, everybody.